Imagine for a moment you had more time, an extra 8 hours, every single day, gifted back to you from the void of unconsciousness. What would you do with a one-third longer life? Would you learn new languages, master an instrument, or build an empire? But what if this gift came with a terrible price? What if, to gain those hours, humanity lost the ability to sleep forever? We spend about a third of our lives in a state of paralysis, blind to the world and vulnerable. On the surface, sleep seems like a profound evolutionary mistake, a bizarre and inefficient quirk of biology. In a world governed by survival of the fittest, why would nearly every complex animal species indulge in such a dangerous habit? To understand what a sleepless world would look like, we first have to understand the chaos that would erupt inside our own minds and bodies. For the first day or two, it might feel like a superpower. The constant hum of a city that never rests, industries churning out products around the clock, individuals pursuing passions without interruption, humanity's collective productivity would skyrocket. But this illusion of progress would quickly begin to fray at the edges and then unravel completely. It turns out, your brain generates waste just like any other biological process. Throughout the day, as your neurons fire and communicate, they leave behind a trail of metabolic byproducts. One of these is a protein called beta amyloid. During sleep, a remarkable janitorial system kicks into gear. Channels in your brain widen, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow through and wash these toxic proteins away. Without sleep, this cleaning process never happens. It would be like a sprawling metropolis whose sanitation workers all went on strike, indefinitely. At first, things just get a little messy. But soon, the garbage piles up in the streets, clogging pathways, breeding disease, and grinding the entire city to a halt. For the sleepless human, beta amyloid and other toxins would accumulate in the brain, relentlessly. The cognitive effects would be the first to appear. Your ability to focus would dissolve. Memory, both short-term and long-term, would become unreliable, as if your mind's filing system had been corrupted. Decision-making would become erratic, governed by emotion and paranoia. And then come the hallucinations. The barrier between the world of your mind and the world outside would begin to dissolve. You wouldn't just be tired, your consciousness would begin to fracture. Within a matter of weeks, the average person would be in a state of perpetual psychosis, unable to distinguish between reality and a waking nightmare. Our bodies would fare no better. Sleep is not just for the brain, it's when our entire system performs critical repairs. Without it, our immune systems would collapse, leaving us vulnerable to every passing infection. Our hormonal balance would be thrown into disarray, dramatically increasing the risk of heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. In short, a human who was suddenly unable to sleep wouldn't gain a third more life. They would rapidly descend into madness and physical decay, likely perishing within a few agonizing weeks. The evidence is clear. For our current biology, sleep is not optional. It is as essential as air and water. So, what does this all mean? It means that if we are to imagine a truly sleepless species, we can't just flip a switch on Homo sapiens. We have to imagine a different kind of human, a species whose evolution took a radically different path billions of years ago. What would it take, biologically, to engineer a creature that could support an unbroken stream of consciousness? To understand this, we have to look at why we evolved to sleep in the first place. Evolution is ruthlessly practical. If a trait exists, it's because it provided a survival advantage. One theory is that sleep began simply as a way to conserve energy. For a diurnal creature like our distant ancestors, the night was a time of great danger and little opportunity for finding food. Hiding away in a state of reduced metabolism was simply the most efficient way to survive until sunrise. But as brains became more complex, sleep took on a new, more critical role, that of a master organizer. While you sleep, your brain is incredibly busy. It replays the events of the day, strengthening the important neural connections and pruning the weak ones. This is the process of memory consolidation. It's how a fleeting experience becomes a long-term memory, and how a practiced skill becomes second nature. A sleepless species would need a way to perform this crucial task while awake. Perhaps their brain would be structured differently. Imagine a brain with two hemispheres that could operate in a more independent fashion, much like a dolphin's. Dolphins engage in unihemispheric sleep, where one half of the brain rests while the other remains alert enough to swim, surface for air, and watch for predators. A sleepless human might experience something similar, a strange, cyclical state where parts of their consciousness would dim or go offline for periods of time, while the rest of the mind carried on. What would that feel like? A constant rolling wave of mental fog? A life lived without ever feeling fully present? Furthermore, the biological cost of running a brain 24/7 would be astronomical. The human brain already consumes about 20% of our body's energy, while taking up only 2% of its mass. A brain that never rests would need a constant, massive supply of fuel. This sleepless species would need a hyper-efficient metabolism and would likely spend a significant portion of its day simply eating. Their entire physiology would be built around energy acquisition and consumption, a biological engine running permanently in the red. The self-cleaning mechanisms we rely on during sleep would also need a radical redesign, creating a system that could flush toxins from the brain in real time, without needing to shut down consciousness. But even if we could solve the immense biological challenges, the psychological and societal consequences would be profound. Imagine a civilization with no night, the fundamental rhythm of day and rest, a cycle that has governed life on Earth for billions of years, would be meaningless to us. Cities would be monuments to perpetual activity, bathed in eternal artificial light. Would this lead to unparalleled creativity and progress, or to a new kind of planetary-scale burnout, a species running on fumes, with no hope of a recharge? And what about our inner worlds? What happens to a species that never dreams? Dreams are more than just bizarre nightly movies. Evidence suggests they are a vital space for emotional regulation, creative problem-solving, and processing trauma. In the surreal landscape of a dream, we can confront our fears and desires in a simulated reality, allowing our minds to experiment without real-world consequences. Without this nightly theater of the self, would our species be less creative, less empathetic? Would our art and stories become sterile, literal, and devoid of metaphor? The very concept of the subconscious might never have been discovered, because there would be no mysterious, inaccessible territory to explore. Ultimately, an unbroken stream of awareness, stretching from birth to death, might be a psychological burden too great to bear. Sleep provides a daily reset, a merciful break in the continuity of our consciousness. It punctuates our lives into chapters, creating the rhythm of days that gives our existence shape and form. To be perpetually awake would be to live a life that is one long, uninterrupted sentence. The self, without the nightly chance to dissolve and reform, could become brittle, even unstable. We might find that in giving up sleep, we had traded away the very thing that allowed our minds to make sense of themselves and the universe. So, the next time you feel the pull of drowsiness, the gentle weight on your eyelids, don't think of it as an inconvenience or a waste of time. It is a legacy, written into our DNA over eons of evolution. It is the silent, nightly work that makes the waking world possible. It is the darkness that gives the light its meaning, the quiet process of unmaking and remaking that allows us to greet each day as a new version of ourselves. In our quest for more time, we might forget that the time we spend in slumber is what makes the rest of our time worth living at all. Consider what this would mean for the very beginning of life. Human infants are born with immature brains, and they spend the majority of their early existence sleeping. This is not wasted time. It is the most intense period of neurological construction they will ever experience. Sleep is the architect of the developing mind, meticulously building and reinforcing the foundations of language, movement, and social understanding. A sleepless infant, therefore, is a biological impossibility in our current form. For such a species to exist, evolution would have had to invent an entirely new model for brain development. Perhaps their young would be born with far more mature, hardwired minds, more like insects than mammals, sacrificing cognitive flexibility for immediate functionality. Or maybe their childhood would be a strange, prolonged state of partial consciousness, a blur of learning and processing that would be unrecognizable to us. The social fabric of the family would be rewoven. The act of parenting would become an unbroken marathon of vigilance. There would be no quiet nights, no moment of parental rest while the child sleeps, no bedtime stories to mark the end of a day. This relentless demand could have forced our sleepless ancestors into radically different social structures. Perhaps humanity would have evolved as a truly collective species, where child-rearing was a communal responsibility by necessity, simply because the burden on two individuals would be biologically unsustainable. The village, not the nuclear family, would be the fundamental unit of our species. Our very perception of a lifetime would be warped. We experience our lives as a sequence of days, discrete chapters separated by periods of unconsciousness. This rhythm allows us to mentally shelve experiences, process emotions, and begin again. For a sleepless human, life would not be a book of many pages, but a single, impossibly long scroll. How would we mark the passage of time without the sunrise and sunset of our own consciousness? Aging would not be a process measured in years, but in one continuous, grinding accumulation of awareness, a relentless forward momentum with no pause and no reprieve. So, the next time you feel the gentle pull of drowsiness, the weight on your eyelids signaling the end of the day, do not see it as an enemy to be fought with caffeine. See it for what it is, a profound and ancient inheritance written into our DNA over billions of years of evolution. It is the silent nightly work that makes the waking world and our own consciousness possible. In our quest for more time, we might forget that the time we spend in slumber is what gives the rest of our time meaning, shape, and the simple grace of a fresh start. If you enjoy delving into profound questions like this one, consider subscribing to see what we explore next.